Well, hello, and welcome to Trash with a capital T. I'm your host, Bobby, and over here we give trashy books, movies, and everything else the love it truly deserves. Some deserve more love than others. This is one of those books that probably doesn't deserve a whole lot of love, but it is also something that's kind of turning into a continuing series on this channel. And yes, I'm talking about me exploring the Left Behind book, specifically right now, the Left Behind the Kids series. Um, for those who have not watched the previous videos, I grew up in a very conservative religious environment, not necessarily in my household, but I went to Christian grade school through high school. And it was during the time these books, this is the book we're talking about today, it was during a time these books were extremely popular, when Left Behind was kind of at its peak. And it was something that stuck with me because even though I am currently and have not been a believer for a very long time, these books, not necessarily these books themselves, but the idea of the rapture and the way it was sold, for lack of a better term, was terrifying. Like you would have anxiety, nightmares, all of that. It terrified me. It wasn't until I was much older, and even now still breaking through all of the kind of trauma that this type of stuff caused, am I able to really sit down and examine these books, coming at them not so much theologically, but as entertainment. And I do kind of spot some of the issues, the theological issues, when I look at these books too, but we're not going to get into that too much. This is not a let's pick on Christianity, or specifically let's not pick on, I believe this is premillennialist Christianity, where they have a specific belief system on the end times and the return of Christ and all of that. I don't want to pick on that. I really want to look at this as, does this work as entertainment? And as far as the first two books have gone, no. The first book, which is basically the rapture happens, was one of the most, I'm hitting my mic, was extremely boring. It was, the writing in these books is not great to begin with. And the plotting in that book was, it was like trying to move through sludge. It moved so slowly, it was unenjoyable. The second book improved things and started to add in some more mystery, and we started to introduce things like the Antichrist and also a subplot involving one of the characters' family members, but it was still pretty dull. There was a few little action scenes in there, but it wasn't anything amazing. And then this book continues that upward trend, though, and narratively, I think this is probably the best of the three I've read so far. By leaps and bounds, I think it's narratively probably the best I've read out of the three. So just to give you a brief kind of introduction, if this is the first video you're watching about these books, we follow four kids post-rapture. The rapture is when Christ comes back, takes all his followers up to heaven whole, like body and all, and leaves behind their clothes and like their jewelry, filling, stuff like that. So they are taken up. That includes the recently dead, or I think all dead, if I remember correctly. Their bodies are healed and brought up to heaven. We are following people who did not meet the standards and requirements to go to heaven, so they are left behind. And we are following four kids. We have Judd, the oldest, who starts out as kind of this rebellious, kind of character, who's kind of turning into the father of this little family unit. He's about 16. We have Vicky, who came from a very poor background. She is kind of becoming the mom of the group, although she really doesn't get a lot to do in this book specifically, but she's one of the characters I actually genuinely kind of like. She's kind of the heart of the group. Then we have the next, and she's supposed to be like 15. Lionel is the next youngest. He's at 13. He is our main character of color. He's very stoic. He comes from a very solid Christian family. His mother was the editor of a a very popular news publication called Global Weekly, which is important because that comes up a lot. Not really in these books, but definitely, and I'm sad that I own this now, in these books. Yeah, that's a different video. But, and then finally we have Ryan, who is 12. He's the youngest of the group. He came from a non-Christian family. His parents both died after the rapture during all of the confusion. There were planes crashing, cars crashing. So all these kids are on their own. Judd, Vicky, and Lionel's families were raptured. Ryan's were not. The only exception is Lionel's uncle Andre, and he is very important because he plays a major part in this book. So in the last book, the big mystery was it had been suspected that Andre had killed himself, but when Lionel went to identify the body, he saw that it wasn't Andre. So he's trying to find out what happened to his uncle. Now, his uncle is associated with some not some great people, and those people have actually taken over Lionel's house, and they're hiding out in the suburbs, and Lionel wants to figure out what's going on. And this is the book where we kind of get all the answers with that. Although the story is not completely resolved in this one, it mostly is. So I'm going to go into full spoiler territory with these because personally, I don't feel like I'm going to recommend these books to anybody. But as a warning now, if you want to read these books, go read them. They read very quickly. I read this one in probably 2 hours. Go read them, then come back and we could talk about it. And as I said, I'm going to be going at this as a completely narrative review. I'm really not going to get into the theology of it. Although I will mention one thing that I do think is very frustrating when reading these. But I'm not going to, I really don't want to get too deep into it, but it's going to come up. So up until this point, we also have to have a kind of save count, like who's saved, who's not. Out of the 3 kids, 3 of them are saved. So they're, full on, they believe that this was a religious event. They have accepted Jesus. Ryan has not reached that point. And that's actually where we start here, where the characters are kind of piling on Ryan. Might I remind you, Ryan is 12. The other characters are all older than him. And he's basically being told that he has to go to church and he has to do all this stuff or Judd is going to kick him out because they have all moved into Judd's house. They're threatening to kick a 12-year-old out. Ryan storms off, and Vicky is the one who finally explains to them, like, you're going to push him away. This kid is trying to process everything. He didn't come from a Christian background. He doesn't know any of this stuff. And even if he does believe it, having to accept it means he has to accept that his parents, who died post-rapture, who were not raptured, who died in, his father died in a plane crash and his mother died in a car crash, are most likely in hell. And she kind of points out all of the stuff I've been saying in the last 2 videos that drives me nuts. And when I was reading that, I was just like, thank you, Vicky. Thank you. Thank you, whatever editor stepped in and said, hey, you're making your characters look like assholes by having them berate a 12-year-old. They do call that out early on in this book, and that's what I think happened. I think an editor went to Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins and said, hey, for this one, maybe back off on picking on the poor 12-year-old. Oh, by the way, this one, I didn't even say the title of the book. It's Left Behind the Kids, Book 3, Through the Flames. Through the Flames, which actually does play into the book. I thought it was just a generic title. No, it's a plot point. It's written by Jerry B. Jenkins and Tim LaHaye. I buy these used because I don't want Jerry B. Jenkins, Tim LaHaye, or Tyndale to be getting my money. I went into greater detail on that in my last video for book 2. If you want to watch that, go for it. I'm really proud of these videos. These books are not great, but the videos I'm making on them and just getting to talk about them is really fun for me. So Ryan decides he's going to prove himself, and he does that by trying to find out what actually happened to Andre. Because like I said, the cliffhanger in the last book, Andre is not dead. Lionel was led to believe that Andre is dead, but when he goes to identify the body, it is not Andre, it is some random guy that Lionel doesn't know. So Ryan, trying to prove his courage, this 12-year-old kid decides he's going to confront a bunch of drug dealers who have taken over Lionel's house. And he actually overhears a character named Talia, who turns out to be Andre's fiance, talking to him on the phone, and can confirm that Andre is not dead. He is hiding out. He is nearly caught by Talia. He is chased down by LeRoy. There's this great chase scene. It actually is quite well done. The writing's still not great, but at least the action moves here. And in doing so, he confronts a lot of his fears that he has carried over the past 2 books. He's still not the bravest character, but you do see him confronting that stuff. And at this point, the save count bumps to 4, I guess. Let me actually explain this. Okay. So Ryan accepts Jesus. And everyone in the first 2 books, and even the beginning of this book, is like, don't you want to accept Jesus so you don't go to hell? We're about to go into the tribulation. If we go into the tribulation, people are going to be dying left and right. If you die, do you want to make sure you're not going to hell? Okay, that's the argument they give him. So when he is facing what he feels is a near-death experience, which is being chased by this man named LeRoy in a giant, ugly old van who might want to hurt him, he accepts Jesus because he has all these other things he's thinking about. Actually, I didn't hate that scene too much because you kind of get a little more insight into Ryan, and you learn about his family. You do hear a little bit of, like, you get some scenes with his parents. Specifically, you get some scenes that are quite cute with his aunt and uncle. And I liked that part. So during all of that, he does accept Jesus. And everyone's happy. Until later, where Pastor Bruce Barnes, the guy who is kind of like the central adult to these kids, he's was the visiting pastor, the visitation pastor at the church. He got left behind. He's now the remaining pastor, and he's trying to kind of like form this group. After they all have this, like, we're so glad you're saved, he calls up Judd and is like, well, are we really sure he's saved? Did he do it for the right reasons? What I'm going to say right now is going to sound insulting, and it's frustrating for me because it's something that comes up a lot with this kind of material, and it came up a lot when I was in that world, which is, did you say the magic words right? That's because they basically say you have to ask Jesus to be your personal savior. Okay, Ryan did that. But suddenly did he do it for the right reasons? Well, the reason you have been giving him this entire time, this kid who is not familiar with Christianity at all, the reason you have been giving him is so he doesn't go to hell. And he did it for that reason. Did you go into anything else with him about it? That he needs to settle, this 12-year-old who has very little exposure to evangelical Christianity, did you go into any other detail with him other than yelling at him about hell? No. So that's the reason he chose. So that's kind of the first part of the book. That is the one theological thing I'm going to discuss because it bugs me. Because they basically contradict themselves in the way they handle this. And it's, did you do it right? Are you sure? And the reason it bugs me is because that is a scare tactic that constantly comes up when it comes to the rapture, which is, are you the right kind of Christian? That is something that comes up in here, not too heavily, but it really comes up in the other ones. Are you the right kind? Did you do it right? Well, what does that mean? Because you were talking about a big, wide religion. And that is the frustrating thing when you get into these books, when you're talking specifically about the religious aspect. And these books are written for children. So when you're doing this, you are constantly putting kids who are reading these in a state of panic because they don't know if they did it right. And I'm going to tell you, they're going to get 6 different answers from talking to different adults. So I get frustrated reading this as an adult. Luckily, that is not a big, huge part of this book. But that is one of the things that I am going to bring up because it is frustrating. And looking at it as an adult who grew up in that environment, I find it really, really irresponsible to kind of always make kids question, well, do you really, truly believe? Is it really what you believe? Are you 100% sure? Well, you are going to have these kids in a freaking panic attack. I remember because I went through that. And eventually I said, you know what? No, I don't. I don't. And not because of that, because of a bunch of other stuff and my own personal journey through that. But we're not getting into that right now. But I would have nightmares about this stuff. It was, and I've always been a very anxious person. I have fairly high anxiety as an adult, but I've always been a fairly anxious person. So Pile that on top. So, all right. Back to the book. So we go through that. Ryan may be saved. Who knows? It's up in the air. Bruce Barnes doesn't know. Pastor Bruce doesn't know. Sorry, my arm is getting tired. So the other major plot is because Ryan can confirm that Andre is alive, Lionel wants to find out where his uncle is. And he goes to Talia at the house and is able to confront her and get her to take him to Andre. And we kind of learn what happened and who was actually the dead guy that Lionel saw. And it turns into this is probably sorry, my mustache is trying to go into my nose. This is probably the most exciting part of the book, and it's a good chunk of this book, where he confronts Andre, and we get to know Talia a little bit through all of this too, Andre's fiance, and I actually didn't mind her as a character. She's definitely got like that hard edge, but I kind of hope she shows up a little more, just because, one, I don't want her to get killed by LeRoy or anyone else, but also because I think they need to start building out the cast a little bit in these books. We're 3 books in. Widen your scope a little bit. I keep hitting my mic. I hope it's not making noises. But we kind of get the idea. We get told what happened. So basically, Andre, before the rapture even happened, owed a ton of money to a drug dealer. That guy was coming after him, and LeRoy, Andre's friend, and also a drug dealer, a rival drug dealer to this guy, tells Andre, hey, we kill this guy, we make it look like you, and you can fake your death. And that's what they do. And they put LeRoy in hiding, or they put Andre in hiding. And the problem they run into is because Lionel has seen the body and found out that it's not Andre, they're worried that he told the cops. He didn't. So what happens is, after Lionel confronts Andre, as he's leaving, LeRoy shows up and kills Andre. He goes into this guy's house, shoots him in the neck, and then blows up the apartment. And there's this great scene because Judd and the others had followed Lionel to make sure he was going to be safe. There's this great scene where Lionel and Judd are trying to get Andre out of the apartment, and there's like they're going through this burning building, and it's actually really exciting. And there's a great moment because they do get Andre outside and he dies, and Lionel is destroyed, and I'm like emotionally destroyed. And I am grateful for that scene because Lionel, up until that point, comes off as a very emotionally closed person. And he's a prominent character. We have stuck with him for the second and third book really stick to him. And seeing him have that moment where you see his humanity, where you see him kind of act like a human, is helpful because it rounds him out as a character. Right now, we really haven't seen that. We've seen that with Ryan, and I appreciate the Ryan character. I actually like the Ryan character. I don't hate any of these characters. That's the thing. I don't hate these characters. I don't feel like some of them are all that well developed. Specifically, Judd and Vicky. They're not as developed as Lionel and Ryan are getting. So I feel they're getting, especially Vicky, I feel like they're getting lost. The Judd character, I basically just see him as like he's starting to become a responsible adult. That's kind of his arc right now. And I think they're handling it okay, where he's having this battle in his head about like, I have to be responsible, and has his gut reaction where he wants to lash out or he wants to question everybody, or like when Vicky was making suggestions, he wanted to lash out at her for trying to basically take control of the situation, but he had to stop and be like, no, I'm an adult. I need to listen. I'm the one these kids are depending on. So there is some stuff there. Vicky, we're kind of losing a little bit. She doesn't have a lot to do right now, so she comes in as like the voice of reason and the voice of empathy. But she's not really in the plot. Her big action scene in this book, it's something that gets retold later when, while Lionel and Judd are getting Andre out of the building, LeRoy spots Vicky and Ryan, and there's this big car chase. But we don't see it. We hear about it later because this book is 140 pages and they couldn't pack it in. And then basically what they do is they end up working with a police officer. What is his name? Because he actually feels like he's going to be a major character. Hold on. Officer Fogarty. He's a Chicago cop. He works with the kids to create a sting so they can catch LeRoy. Because, and this is the one thing I will say this book got, I'm surprised it handled this way. I wasn't sure how they were going to handle police. It's a touchy subject, especially now, but I wasn't sure how they were going to handle police. And one of the things that they do first, like right off the bat, when it comes to Andre's murder specifically and these other murders, is they point out that the police are probably not going to be paying that much attention to it because all of the people involved are black and poor. And they have to take the initiative to get the police to act. So they do point that out. And I kind of appreciated that that was there. And Officer Fogarty seems like an okay character. I hope they do more with him too. This is a long series. This is 40 books. I want them to develop more characters because at some point we're going to start losing characters. Because as with the main adult series, once you get into the thick of things, once Nikolai Carpathia takes over, characters are going to start dying left and right. So I want them to start developing characters now before that happens. But this ends with the sting about to happen. Overall, it's still a mid book. Like, it's better than the first two. It's still not great. But as far as these kinds of books go, as a young adult book goes, especially a religious fiction young adult book, it's definitely a big improvement. I didn't dislike this one. I can't say I loved it, but I actually was not bored through any of this. I thought the plotting was getting a lot better. The storytelling is getting a lot better. The writing is still not good, but the plotting improving is giving me hope for the next couple books. I'm going to put this down because I'm kind of done talking about that. But so that's something that I'm hoping carries on because I am going to do the fourth book. Let me pull up my handy dandy box set. Sorry, I'm shuffling books around. So if I'm gonna do the next one, which is Facing the Left Behind the Kids 4, Facing the Future. My goal is to have this up. So this one will be, this episode will be in October. I film ahead, so I'm actually filming this in September, but it's probably going to be released in late October. So this one will probably be the November book for the series. And I'm at least going to make it through the first 6 unless I just mentally cannot do it because those are the ones I have. So after the 6th, I will reevaluate if I'm going to continue doing this as a series. And I am planning on rereading this one for the 3rd time. I was telling my husband, I have read this twice. The problem is if I want to talk about this, I need to read this because other than some of the crazy politics in this, I don't remember the book all that well. It doesn't stick with you, or it didn't stick with me. So I am going to try and reread this. We'll see how that goes. Because one of the things with this one that is missing in the kids' books is a lot of the weird political asides. Specifically, like there's this weird conversation with characters over the subject of abortion post-rapture. And there's some other stuff that comes up. Thankfully, when it comes to these, so far, the politics have kind of been left out. But, one of the big plot points that I left out. I can't believe I left this out because he's one of my favorite characters, which is really funny because he's the bad guy. You have Nikolai Carpathia, the Antichrist, start to really form. He actually shows up in this book. The funny thing is they have him have the same speed. So these books over this book, hold on. This book and this book overlap. I have a feeling we're going to be out of this book probably by, if we're going timeline wise, the 6th book will probably take us out of this first book, the part of the timeline. He starts to show up. He does the same speech that he does in this. So they're watching a TV broadcast of Nicolae Carpathia addressing the UN. And his big speech is to name off the names of all of these countries for like 20 minutes. And everyone is enraptured by it. Like they're all just taken in. And it's very funny because he's very obviously, they've had, I did actually think this was funny. Bruce, the Pastor Barnes, explains who the Antichrist is, like what kind of person to look out for. And the kids see Nicolae Carpathia do the speech, and he's very obviously fitting all of those marks. And they're like, oh, I'd love to see the Antichrist try and talk that guy down. Like instantly taken in by this guy. It's quite funny. And I did kind of appreciate that little bit of humor there. Okay. This video has gone on long enough. 25 minutes is more than enough time. Probably should have been. I tried to keep these shorter, but I kept rambling. To talk about Left Behind the Kids, Book 3, Through the Flames. The reason I keep saying the title so slow is because I want to say Through the Fire, which is a Shaka Khan song. I think it's Shaka Khan. But it's a song that I hear regularly when I like play Spotify. And so my brain wants to switch to the song title. This book has nothing to do with Shaka Khan, by the way. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to wrap this up here. I'm going to aim to do, at least one of these books a month until I get through the first 6. And like I said, I'll reevaluate after I do the first 6, because that's where my box set ends. I have 4, 5, and 6 left for this. And I do plan on attempting to read this one. I'm not making any promises, though. The kids' books I can read because they move very quickly. This book is not short. It clocks in at 339 pages. It is not big type. It is a slow read. The first 2 books of the adult series, if I remember correctly, are pretty slow reads. It's kind of like what we have with the kids ones. The difference is the kids ones are 140 pages. These are double the length. So I might read that one, and if I do, obviously I'll do a video on it. I might just do a video talking about my experience of reading them in the past and kind of some of the issues I had. The other problem talking about these is you do have to get into the adult books. You do have to get into the politics a little more. And I want to make sure I do that the right way. I don't want to come in swinging like an idiot, because there are some touchy political issues that get brought up in this book in weird ways, especially when it comes to Israel. That's a big part of this. And I'll explain why if I cover this, if it comes up in the kids' books, it might, because a big part of the deal is one of the things that's going to set off the tribulation is the Antichrist, Nicolae, is going to sign a deal with Israel. But we'll get into that if we talk about the first Left Behind book, because they go into more detail about that stuff in that book. All right. So if you like this video, subscribe. I got new videos coming out every week. New videos release on Sundays, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. Haven't changed that. Don't plan on changing that anytime soon. And love what you love. Enjoy what you're reading and watching. And have an amazing morning, afternoon, or evening. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.